81 years old, and I need to tell you about the two voices that have been fighting inside my head for 60 years. One of them finally won, but it took me most of my life to figure out which one I should have been listening to all along. My name is Vincent, and I spent the first half of my life running from fear disguised as common sense. The second half, I spent trying to undo the damage that fear caused. And I'm here to tell you that fear is a liar, a very convincing liar, but a liar nonetheless. Let me tell you about my father. His name was Anthony, and he was the funniest man I've ever known. Not funny like he told jokes at parties. Funny like he could walk into a room and change the entire atmosphere just by being himself. He could make a funeral feel less heavy. He could make a Monday morning feel like Saturday. That was his gift. My father wanted to be a performer, a comedian. Back in the 1940s, when he was in his 20s, he'd do little shows at community centers and church basements. People would come just to see him. They'd leave with their faces hurting from laughing. My mother told me she fell in love with him the first time she saw him on stage because he looked so alive up there, like that's what he was built to do. But my father never became a comedian. He became an accountant. Because in 1948, you didn't become a comedian. You got a real job. You got something safe, something respectable, something that wouldn't embarrass your family or leave your wife wondering how she'd feed the kids. So he went to night school, got his accounting certificate, started working at a firm downtown, put away the dream like it was a toy he'd outgrown. And for the next 20 years, he did other people's taxes and came home exhausted and empty. I was 12 years old when the firm he worked for laid him off. I remember the night he told us. He sat at the kitchen table with this look on his face like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. My mother started crying. My father just stared at the wall. He'd done everything right. He'd chosen the safe path. He'd sacrificed what he wanted for what was practical. And it didn't protect him. The safe job wasn't safe after all. We struggled for 2 years after that. My father picked up whatever work he could find. My mother took in sewing. We moved to a smaller apartment, and I watched my father shrink. Not physically, but something inside him got smaller and quieter. Until one day I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard him laugh. That's when I learned the lesson. You can fail at what you don't want just as easily as you can fail at what you do want. So you might as well take the chance on something that matters to you. But here's the thing. I learned that lesson, and then I spent 40 years ignoring it. Because when I was 17 and thinking about what to do with my life, I had a choice. I loved theater. I loved performing. I'd been doing school plays since I was 7 years old, throwing myself into characters, making people laugh, making them feel something. That's what made me feel alive. But I also remembered my father sitting at that kitchen table. I remembered the fear in my mother's eyes. I remembered the shame he carried for years after losing that safe job, and I thought, I can't do that to myself. I can't risk that kind of failure. So I chose practical. I went to business school. I got a job in sales. I was good at it, made decent money, built a career, got married, had kids. From the outside, I did everything right. But inside, I was my father, sitting at a desk doing work that didn't matter to me, coming home exhausted, going to bed knowing I'd wake up and do it all again tomorrow. For 40 years I did that. And the whole time, there was this voice in the back of my head asking, what if? What if I'd taken the chance? What if I'd been brave enough to try? What if I'd trusted that the thing I loved could actually sustain me? But fear had a louder voice. Fear said, be realistic. Fear said, you have responsibilities. Fear said, you can't just do what you want. That's childish. That's irresponsible. You need to be practical. So I was practical. For 40 years, I was so damn practical that I forgot what it felt like to be excited about waking up in the morning. When I was 57, my wife left me. Not for another man. She just left. She said she couldn't spend another 20 years living with someone who was only half alive. She said I'd been sleepwalking through our marriage for decades, and she was tired of trying to wake me up. That broke me. Not because I didn't see it coming, I did, but because she was right. I had been sleepwalking. I'd been going through the motions of a life without actually living it. 6 months after she left, I was sitting alone in my apartment on a Saturday night. I was 58 years old, divorced, kids grown and barely speaking to me, working a job I'd never cared about. And I looked around at my life and I realized I had nothing that mattered, nothing that felt like mine. So I made a decision that everyone thought was crazy. I quit my job. I took the money I'd saved for retirement and I enrolled in acting classes. At 58 years old, I decided to finally do the thing I'd been too afraid to do at 17. My kids thought I'd lost my mind. My brother told me I was having a midlife crisis. My ex-wife didn't say anything, but I could hear the judgment in her silence. But I didn't care anymore, because I finally understood something. The fear that had been protecting me all those years wasn't protecting me from failure, it was protecting me from living. And I'd rather fail at something I loved than succeed at something I didn't. The first acting class I took, I was terrified. I was the oldest person in the room by 30 years. Everyone else was in their 20s, beautiful and confident and talented. And here I was, 58 years old, trying to remember how to be brave. But the first time I got on that stage and performed a scene, something happened. I felt alive. For the first time in 40 years, I felt like myself. Not the practical version, not the responsible version, the real version. The version I'd buried when I chose safety over truth. I'm not going to tell you I became a famous actor. I didn't. I did community theater, small productions, local stuff. I made no money. I lived in a tiny apartment and worked part-time at a bookstore to pay rent. By every practical measure, I'd failed. But I was happy, actually happy, not content, not comfortable, happy. I'm 81 years old now. I've been doing theater for 23 years. I've performed in probably 100 shows, small audiences, no reviews, no acclaim, just me on stage doing the thing I was built to do. And I've learned something in these 23 years. Everything you gain in life eventually falls apart. The money goes away. The career ends. The achievements fade. The only thing that stays is what you gave, the moments you were actually present, the times you were actually yourself. I spent 40 years building a life that looks successful from the outside, and all of it dissolved. The career is gone, the marriage is gone, most of the money is gone. None of it mattered, but these last 23 years, these matter, because I finally stopped letting fear make my decisions. I finally stopped choosing the path that looked safe and started choosing the path that felt true. Here's what I want you to understand. Fear is always going to be there. It's always going to have a voice. It's always going to tell you to be practical, to be realistic, to choose the safe thing. But safe is a lie. There is no safe. My father chose safe, and it didn't protect him. I chose safe for 40 years, and it didn't protect me either. Safe is just fear wearing a mask of wisdom. The only real safety is living a life that feels true to who you are. Because if you don't, you'll spend decades building something that doesn't matter. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you wasted the only life you had trying to avoid failure. I look at young people now and I see them making the same choice I made. They have something they love, something they're good at, something that makes them feel alive, but they're choosing the practical path because they're afraid of failure, afraid of judgment, afraid of struggling. And I want to shake them and tell them what I learned too late. You're going to struggle either way. You might as well struggle doing something you care about. Because here's the truth, you can fail at what you don't love. My father proved that, I proved that. And when you fail at something you don't love, you're left with nothing. No success, no passion, just regret. But if you try for what you actually want and you fail, at least you tried. At least you were brave. At least you can look back and say you gave it everything instead of wondering what if for the rest of your life. I'm 81 years old. I live in a small apartment. I have very little money. I never became famous. I never made it big. By every practical measure, I failed. But I'm not my father. I didn't die wondering what could have been. I didn't spend my whole life waiting for permission to be myself. I didn't let fear steal my one chance at actually living. These last 23 years have been the happiest of my life, not because everything worked out, but because I finally stopped pretending. I finally stopped choosing what I thought I should want and started choosing what I actually wanted. And if I could go back and talk to my 17-year-old self, here's what I'd say. Don't wait 40 years. Don't let fear convince you that practical is the same as safe. Don't sacrifice what makes you feel alive for what makes you feel secure. Because security is an illusion and time is not. You're going to fail sometimes, that's guaranteed, but you get to choose what you fail at. Fail at something that mattered. Fail at something you loved. Fail at something that made you feel like yourself. Don't fail at someone else's dream because you were too afraid to chase your own. I'm 81 years old. I've got maybe 5-10 years left if I'm lucky. And I'm not afraid anymore, not of dying, not of failing, not of what people think. The only thing I'm afraid of is that someone watching this will make the same mistake I made, that they'll choose fear over truth, that they'll wait 40 years to start living, that they'll wake up at 81 and realize they wasted most of their life being someone they weren't. Don't do that, please. Don't let fear write your story, because fear doesn't want you to be happy. Fear wants you to be safe, and safe is just another word for small. Choose love. Choose truth. Choose the thing that makes you feel alive, even if it scares you, especially if it scares you, because the clock is ticking for all of us. And you don't get a second chance at this. You don't get to go back and redo the years you spent being practical. I got 23 years of actually living. I wish I'd had 60. Don't make my mistake. The clock is ticking. What are you going to do with the time you have left?